If you break his laws, you will be punished. Are you prepared to stand trial and profess your guilt or innocence before the seven?
I confess before the seven and freely admit my crimes.
Shame!
I am guilty of depravity,
Shame! Shame!
dishonesty,
Shame! Shame!
profligacy,
Shame!
and arrogance.
Shame! Shame!
I humble
Shame.
myself before the seven and accept whatever punishment the gods deem just.
In this video, we want to talk about the path that Europeans have taken over the past few centuries, which has led to remarkable progress. The history of Europe has had many ups and downs, starting from the Middle Ages and reaching the Renaissance and then entering the Enlightenment era of which has caused significant changes. For example, during the Middle Ages, the people of Europe did not make any progress and they lived in difficult circumstances without any significant achievements. However, when they entered the Renaissance, developments began to take shape. It can be said that during this time, the Catholic Church had a complete influence on people's lives. The roots that led the people of Europe into the Enlightenment era several centuries later were the same Renaissance. Countries moved away from rural life and people turned to reading books, especially the books of Greek philosophers. Interestingly, these pressures also led to the flourishing of many philosophers from within this weak social class. During that same period, around 1430 AD, a person named Gutenberg invented a printing press in Germany. And with the invention of the printing press, books that were gathering dust in libraries were reprinted very quickly and reached a large number of people. During this same Renaissance era, as countries were gradually expanding, long-distance travel was necessary for trade and discovery of new distant regions. When Europeans began to travel to the east, they realized that the Easterners were centuries ahead of them. For example, a merchant named Bi Sheng had invented the printing press in China about 400 years ago. As these Europeans traveled to each Eastern country, they saw that those countries were much more advanced in terms of civilization and progress than they were, both in terms of science, art, and architecture, as well as military and army matters. The Europeans blamed the Catholic Church for all the reasons of their backwardness. Whatever problem arose, they said that the Church was to blame. As I mentioned before, the Catholic Church had complete control over all aspects of people's lives and had a complete influence. As science was rapidly progressing during this time, people became more skeptical of the teachings of the Church. For example, the issue of roundness of the earth was one of the most important topics that was raised at that time and was scientifically proven. Or, for example, sinners could buy their sins and be forgiven by paying money to the Church, which they called selling forgiveness. These issues, along with many others, caused people to become distrustful of the Church, and these same events led to an interesting explosion, the beginning of Europe's transformation. In 1515, a monk in Germany named Martin Luther rebelled against the Church abuses. Martin Luther's rebellion caused many angry waves against the Catholic Church, called the Protestant Reformation. In the 16th and 17th centuries, Protestants and Catholics fought each other in wars, and these wars caused a widespread wave of doubt and uncertainty among the people because they thought, how can one religion have two different versions? How can we know which one is right and which one is wrong? This same factor caused them to distance themselves from religious foundations and seek answers to their curiosity about existence, the world, and everything through the lens of science. During this time, the microscope and telescope were invented, and they became the new gateways to the progress of science in Europe. Francis Bacon was a person in the 17th century who believed that human progress takes shape gradually through experiencing and studying different things, not by relying on the Church. One of the most influential philosophers of that time was Pierre Bayle, whose thoughts had an impact on the future. Voltaire, one of the Bayle's followers in the 18th century, believed that humans are innately good, and it is religion that corrupts them. Exactly at this time in the 17th century, the Age of Enlightenment is taking place with the rejection of the churches and the inventions of new discoveries leading to such rapid progress in Europe that they surpass even the Eastern countries. During this time, Isaac Newton discovered the general law in the discussion of the attraction of objects, and he believed that this law works uniformly throughout the entire universe. After this discovery, people thought that if one of the behaviors of the world can be described with this law, then with other mathematical and physical laws that have not yet been discovered, it is probably possible to understand the nature of the entire universe. So here people thought that if we can understand the nature and details of the universe with these physical and mathematical laws, then what priests and churches have told us have far been wrong and false. Peter Gray, a historian, describes the conditions of that time as follows. According to them, Christianity is an infection, a sacred contagious disease, a sick and microbial drain that is sometimes inactive but always dangerous. It is always a source of bigotry and oppression. Science and philosophy in conflict with the church. Here, in addition to science, philosophers emerged who invited people to think. The church had always frightened people from thinking, and people even accepted illogical things that the church said. This is due to the fact that the origins of religion is emotions, especially fear. During this time, a person named John Locke said that humans have the power of reasoning and intelligence, and it is better to think about a question with our own reasoning before asking someone else, and maybe we will find the answer. These words of John Locke spread a revolution in Europe, where important philosophers began to theorize and old people's thoughts were re-examined. Some of the most important philosophers were René Descartes, George Berkeley, and David Hume. These thoughts led people to quickly start major revolutions in Europe. The first thing they wanted was the complete separation of religion from politics. After that, philosophers gave theories that the absolutist monarchy that speaks first and last has caused corruption and has hindered the progress of the country. This story led to the creation of parliaments and assemblies that limited the power and authority of the king. This trend continued until European countries saw world wars. Only in World War I and II, about 100 million people were killed. And these countries have gone through very dangerous crises, from the Crusades conflicts between the Catholic Church and Protestants, the French Revolution, and the emergence of Napoleon Bonaparte. All of these centuries of war and revolutions that took place in Europe have made them reach the position of modern civilization and progress today. Today, Eastern countries are trying to get closer to the civilizations that Europeans one day achieved with great difficulty. This progress is taking place differently in Eastern countries, but we have to see how Middle Eastern people want to deal with the same issues that Europeans faced centuries ago. In future videos, we will definitely talk more about the changes and developments in Middle Eastern countries. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel for more content.